Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Peer Up session. So, a quick intro about Peer Up for people who are new here. Peer Up is a student-led initiative, and we connect students with alumni and professionals for meaningful discussions that address real high school experiences and challenges. And some guidelines to follow to ensure a smooth session. Please stay on mute and keep your video off to minimize distractions. Maintain respectful communication in the chat, although questions in the chat are encouraged at all times. And finally, the session will be recorded and shared on YouTube if you want to review it. So meet our speaker for today, Chaitanya Vankireddy. Chaitanya is a graduate from the University of Pennsylvania and will soon be studying at the Perelman School of Medicine. In school, she deliberately tried things outside her comfort zone, such as Science Olympiad, robotics, mock trial, and much more. In college, she added consulting clubs and other interests that had nothing to do with being pre-med. Today, she's even exploring venture capital. And so here's an introduction to today's topic. There's more than one way to wear a white coat. The road to medicine is rarely a straight line. From Science Olympiad in debate to a nanotech startup in a gap year in healthcare finance, Chaitanya explored boldly and learned from every detour. Now an MD/MBA candidate at Penn, she will share how curiosity and intentional choices can lead you somewhere better than any straight path could. Thank you for joining, and I'll pass it off to Chaitanya now.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Hey guys, I'm Chai. I'm entering my second year of med school right now. And I'm back at Penn, just like I was for undergrad. And today I'm just gonna spend a little time talking about how I got here. I think the easiest way to center my talk is just to talk about my journey and talk about some lessons that I learned along the way. So I've broken it down into four big takeaways that I
这你
hope.
high school 的，你看大概能听多少是多少，这是你 high school 的。
Yeah. Um, so just like four big takeaways that I want to cover today. The first one being sometimes the best decisions are the ones that completely shake yourself out of everything you know and just out of the context you're familiar with. Number two, knowing what you don't want to do is almost as valuable as knowing what you do want to do. Number three, exploring other interests does not mean that you're abandoning your passion. A lot of times it means that you're clarifying your passions. And number four, other people are not going to understand your path while you're building it, and that's completely okay. So I want to start out some relatably. I, like all of you, most of you, grew up in the Seattle area. Um, I knew I wanted to do medicine pretty early on. My mom is a physician, so I was exposed to it like very early on. And I always thought it was the coolest job ever. I just had a huge fascination with it, especially because it was so service oriented. And I thought that that was like the most fulfilling thing I could do. So I did what most kids that are interested in medicine do, and I immediately hyperfixated on STEM. I did Science Olympiad, robotics, science competitions, like anything I could get my hands on, I did. And I found it really interesting. But even though it was really interesting, I started feeling like I was pigeonholing myself like really quickly. And around ninth grade, I started getting really antsy. So it felt like I wasn't exploring all of my interests, like all of my friends were doing these like STEM adjacent activities. And I felt like there had to be something more out there for me to learn from, or for me to do, or for me to see. And that's when I started researching my options, and I came across this concept of boarding school. Um, so I ended up applying and going to Exeter, and the idea was initially attractive to me because it meant like I was going to be immersed around people from like all over the country, all over the world, actually. And people who are passionate about different things, like grew up in different like socioeconomic classes than me. Um, and I would just get exposure that I like didn't get growing up in the area. And by no means is this a boarding school advertisement. I don't want the parents in the audience to think I'm, trying to send their kids away to boarding school. But for me, I really do think it was like one of the best decisions I like ever made. I was immediately surrounded by people that were just interested in completely different things. I was like a minority person that was like strictly interested in STEM. And so that really forced me to start exploring these like other extracurriculars like Model UN, economics, like debate. And I ended up committing a lot of time into those activities, like to the point where I was committing even more time to those activities than I was to like my STEM activities. And I think people around me were really confused because they were wondering, like, why does this girl that continues to say that she's interested in medicine keep doing things that are so unrelated to medicine? But there was something really attractive to me about those clubs that I like couldn't really place at the time. But when I look back at it, I think I was really drawn to like the scale of the impact that they were grappling with. It was just like way more people, like the impact of like the social impact of like the things we were talking about were just at like such a broad scale. And so I found like discussing like policy, economics, like systems as like really rewarding and learning about it really interesting. So that was when I started hesitating about medicine a little bit. And I began wondering, would it be more fulfilling for me to kind of pursue these like larger impact, larger scale type of careers than medicine? And that kind of like ties back to my first takeaways. Like sometimes the best decisions are like not the ones that you expect. They're going to expose you to people who, think completely different than you, and they'll challenge your assumptions in really productive ways, and that's okay. So anyways, I started trying to figure out ways I could integrate my interest in medicine with something else. So when I applied ED to Penn for undergrad, I was very intentional about choosing Penn because I wanted somewhere interdisciplinary. I wanted somewhere that would like let me explore my other like options. And I think I knew also intuitively that like the school I chose would really influence like that plus part of like MD plus. Um, and I was definitely right. As soon as I got to Penn, I was exposed to the world of like business, consulting club, startups, blah, blah. And I think startup culture immediately attracted me because I was drawn to this idea that you can have a strong vision and like the right execution, you can impact like millions and millions of people. So the very first thing I did joining Penn, like this is probably even slightly before I joined Penn, like in the summer, I joined this like healthcare nanotech startup and worked really hard like as an analyst in this startup my freshman year. And it came to this like crossroads at one point where the CEO asked me to take a year off of school and take a salary from the startup and just like dedicate my time full time to it. And that's when I really had to think. And I reflected on it seriously and I realized, the realities of startups and what I had learned in the last year was very different than the reality I had imagined going into it. And I kind of realized, maybe startups are just like not for me. And that wasn't what I had originally thought, but that's okay. But the experience was still really valuable for me because I learned a lot about business and finance. And I learned that, like, hey, maybe that's something worth exploring. So that kind of ties back into my second takeaway, which is you learn a lot from figuring out what you don't want to do. And that's equally valuable as like thinking that you know what you want to do. And every single experience like does not have to become your final career path to be valuable, but it can definitely inform what you're about to do. Um, so anyways, after that, I joined a consulting club in college and learned more about the business angle. And through that experience, I started realizing that maybe my passion was less about building a company myself or like building a medical device, and maybe it was more about improving healthcare systems so that they can better serve populations and get, the quality healthcare that they deserve. So I invested a lot of time into figuring what that was out and fleshing that out to the point where I actually in my year off before med school, I took up a healthcare finance job. And, once again, people around me were very confused. I think a lot of people, were just like, I mean, I know a lot of close friends of mine that were taking bets on if I would actually go to medical school or I would just kind of, we call it like sell out and continue on with finance. But I think I had a lot of conviction in myself and I knew that, I would be unsatisfied with any career if I did not get to practice medicine. And I came to that realization only from taking time away and like stepping away from my clinical experiences. Um, and so like regardless of whatever that extra thing was, like I had to combine it with medicine. And so I think that leads me to my next takeaway, which is, exploring other interests does not mean you're abandoning your passion. In my case, it was medicine. I think in a lot of ways, exploring your interests like help clarify why you're interested in your passion. Like for me, exploring business did not mean I was like pulling away from medicine. It just helped reinforce like the aspects of medicine that I still like thought I needed in my career and what I wanted to like build upon. So I think one of the biggest lessons I learned is that, you know, you do not need every decision to make perfect sense to everyone else in real time. Sometimes people only understand your path like as soon as they see the final product. And obviously that's when you can say it eloquently, like in front of like everybody and say, this is what I did. But in real time, obviously it doesn't feel like you know what you're doing. But at the end of the day, like you're the one that has to like live your life, not the people that are like looking from the outside in. And you just have to make choices and figure out like the combination of interests that feel authentic to you. And so for me, like medicine stayed constant, but the way I understood what medicine was changed pretty dramatically. And I started off thinking about medicine, mostly as a one-on-one service profession, which it absolutely is. But over time, I also realized like there's so much more to medicine, like the systems, the incentives, access, innovation, like leadership positions that like all go into like delivering healthcare. And so I'd love to lean more into that in my career as a physician as well, which I would never have known unless I like took all these little detours. Um, so I think like my biggest advice is like don't be afraid to explore. Like if you're interested in something and something else, that really does not mean that you're less serious about the thing you thought you were interested in. It could just mean, you're thinking about different ways of exploring it and like broadening it. So, be honest with yourself. Like, think about like what energizes you, like what drains you, and don't be afraid to like pivot to different things. The goal is not to build the most impressive resume. It's like just to build like a life and a career and a journey that like feels meaningful to you and is like interesting to you. But yeah, I'll leave it open for questions.
Thank you so much, Chai. I think a lot of high schoolers can relate to feeling like they have to choose one path pretty early and choose the right extracurriculars or commit to a specific career. So, this really shows the value of exploring different interests. And that brings us to the first question. Your path to medicine, like you've said, hasn't been a straight line at all. So when you look back at it, what is something that you tried that felt unrelated at the time, but ended up mattering more than you expected?
Yeah, so I think a really good example of that from high school is the reason why I went to my first like Model UN like club meeting was because like my friends that I had met a week ago, it was like the second week of school or something. My friends that I had met a week ago were going and they told me to like tag along. And so I went in not expecting um, to like it. And then I sat in for one meeting and I was like, wow, this is like really interesting. And I really feel like I could kind of do it. And I started off like pretty bad at it. Like I was like, I really struggled to like make the speeches. I kind of I had a lot of catching up to do in terms of like just understanding you know, um, like international relations and things like that. But I eventually found my niche. I like found parts of like my style that I could lean into and like build off of my strengths. And like there was like a lot of mentorship in the club that like it really encouraged me to keep going. And then I found like a really big passion for teaching. And so like when I eventually like my senior year, I invested so much time in the club, I became president of the club. And that was really because like I was, really passionate about teaching people that were like me that like really didn't think like Model UN would be their thing. Or like, didn't think that they would be good at it and like cultivated like their interests and things. So that ended up being like a really meaningful experience for me because I still like, use the knowledge of like international relations or just like, upkeep with like current events and stuff that I learned from like my time in Model UN. And yeah, my passion for teaching really grew there. So yeah, I would say like that is like a very good example of something.
A lot of students are scared to try something new because they might be bad at it or it might lead to nowhere. And how would you reframe that fear?
I think for me, like for context, when I try something new, I assume I'll be bad at it, or I assume that it will lead to failure. I never go in thinking like this will work out for me. But I think a lot of it is about you have to enjoy the journey like more than the result, like every step of the way. And I think when you really lean into the journey and like what you're getting from the journey, you realize you're getting so much more out of these experiences than like the end result. You're getting, like perspective, you're meeting new people. Like these are all things that are valuable that could like help you in what you eventually decide. But I also think like if you're scared of failing, like you're also probably scared of like asking for help. And I think like getting over that is like another huge um it's like a huge hurdle to like overcome. But if you kind of look at your peers and you're like, I really admire these people and I like have like a great amount of respect for them, and then you like go like earnestly and like ask like, hey, like how would you, go about this if you were me? You'd actually be very surprised like how many people are willing to help you. Like so many people want to help you get better at these things.
The next few questions are about like trying many things and kind of ties into this failure topic. So in high school, you did debate and competitive speaking, mock trial, biology club, and in college, you did consulting clubs that had nothing to do with pre-med. So why did you spread out so much instead of going all in on just medicine?
I think for me, I like knew pretty early, like, yes, I'm interested in medicine, but I have so many of these other interests that I felt like I wasn't doing my due diligence on, and I wasn't really like putting my all. Like, for me, it kind of felt pointless to quote unquote like continue to explore medicine through like clinical experiences unless I was like I really felt like I was helping people. So like my volunteering experiences in college were really valuable to me because I really felt like I was like, applying skills I learned for like other people, but it didn't feel like the clinical stuff I was doing to like explore if I really liked it or not. Like I felt like I had to put that time into things like I actually didn't know if I liked. I actually didn't know like what was going on in them. And so that kind of left like my balance to be more skewed towards like, unconventional extracurriculars for like a pre-med student. But that doesn't mean like I wasn't working hard. Like I don't want to say it's like super easy to do this. Like I was working like overnight shifts for like scribing. Like I was, doing a lot to keep up with that like pre-med kind of like the pre-med sort of baseline extracurriculars you have to do. Um in order to like stay in the game. But I think for me, I just like it was completely worth it to me to like work harder so I could like be able to do these interdisciplinary things because it didn't even feel like work. Like when I was like learning new things, I'd be like, wow, like that's um like super interesting. And it didn't feel like I was doing a job. It felt like people were doing me favors by like letting me tack onto these projects or like tack onto these like into these clubs and stuff. So I think yeah, like that's probably a good sign of like when you're doing the right things is like when you feel like you're not like working that hard. Because I never felt like I was working like crazy hard. Like most of my friends will tell you that I was like, you know, very relaxed most of undergrad. Yeah.
I remember you were talking a little bit about mentors and how, as long as you approach them, they're definitely willing to help you. But how truly important are those mentors, and what can you do with them versus without them?
I think like the concept of mentorship, like a lot of high school students have this picture of like there's this like elder figure in your life and then they're going to like tell you the ways to do certain things and like you'll follow that path and that's what a mentor is. But I really do think that mentors can be like they can be your friends, they can be people in like years below you, they can be like coaches, they can be teachers, they can be a random like faculty member you reach out to. Like there's so many people, they can be your parents, they could be your parents' friends. Like mentorship can come from like all different places, and I think like the premise of it is like you have to be willing to listen. Like you have to be willing to like take what people say, like the advice people give and like implement it. And I think um when you're like open and willing, like people kind of they can see that their advice is not falling on deaf ears and they're like willing to help you because of that. And to the like question of like how important is like mentorship. I mean, mostly everything I've done is because somebody has like empowered me to do it. Somebody has told me like when I've been vulnerable and I've been like, I'm like really struggling with this. Somebody has like told me like, keep pushing past that. That's okay. Like so many people go through this. So I think, mentorship is like incredibly important. You have to like trust people, you have to like lean into people, be vulnerable, and then you'd be surprised like how much help you can get in return. And then, pay it forward as well. Like if you can help somebody else, like indirectly or directly, like, make sure you do that as well. So I think it's like it's what keeps all of us like going, right? So yeah, definitely don't underestimate the power of like talking to new people, like talking to somebody that you respect or like admire. Like there's usually something like important that you can learn or take away from that conversation.
So you talked about trying a lot of things. How do you decide what you should keep investing in and what to let go of?
I think my philosophy for like trying something new is like invest 100% into it. The first couple months you do something. Like it really takes a while to really understand something. Like don't come in with like, try to leave your like preconceived like judgments or like notions behind you. Like really invest into it. Like force yourself to be passionate in it. And then after like you do it for a lot of time, zoom out and see if it like fills your cup. And if it doesn't, it's okay to like figure out a way to like leave respectfully. There's usually also like a bypass that comes like down a road and you'll be forced to make a decision. Like for example, for my like nanotech startup, there was kind of a very clear bypass. Like either like I take a year off and do this or I don't. Um, and that forced me to really think about like, am I passionate about this? Is this something like worth investing more time? And then I think I kind of realized like there was kind of diminishing returns for me to like continue to invest more time. So that's when I decided to stop. But I really had to invest my all, like 100% into it, in order to like make that decision thoughtfully and really think about like what I did and didn't like from it.
You've just been talking about how you were spending that time in the startup and how you really had to invest your all in it, as you just said, to get value out of it. Can you walk us through the process of what you were doing in the startup and how you really put everything you had into it?
So I think for also helpful context for this was I joined college in the middle of COVID. So my first semester was all virtual. So I had like kind of a lot of time on my hands. So I got connected with them just through like Handshake, which is, I don't know if high schools have it, but it's kind of like LinkedIn, but for like just for students and like job postings. And so I got involved with that startup, and the CEO was kind of like trying to get like a couple interns, and he was just like this really enthusiastic guy. And he really sold me on the mission. Like I really felt like the nanotech startup, it was like a healthcare nanotech startup that was like focused on tackling this like counterfeit medication issue. And it's like affecting like millions of people a year. Like people are dying from counterfeit medications. Like it's like a $3 billion industry. Like I started getting like very passionate about it like very quickly. And so that drew me in and I was like, wow, if like this can work, like if we can get this like product out, like we can save so many lives and like there's all that. So what I actually did for like the startup was it was like a lot of research, like BD research. It was I maintained the cap table. I would reach out to like venture capital firms to like, try and like set up meetings. Eventually, it came to the point where I was taking like VC calls by myself, like when the CEO couldn't make that. It was like a lot of like different things. Like I was cultivating my own relationships within the company, and then eventually he asked me to like run the internship. So I started doing that after 6 months. And then that was when I was like a full-time student, obviously, and we were like on campus. And, I kind of realized like very quickly that the reality of running a startup is like not as glamorous as like that like unicorn fantasy idea. Like, I mean, we hear about like all of these like, the Bill Gates, like Steve Jobs of the world that like make these like crazy companies. But I think like, there's like a lot of like grunt work that goes on behind them, especially if your startup is not taking off like really fast or is not like a beloved company in like the VC world. I think it's like it takes a lot of time to like build traction and it takes like a lot of like cold emails and stuff like that. And I think I fell out of love with the process like really quickly. And but I did kind of realize like, oh, scale is something that is interesting to me. Like this scale, like being able to impact like all of these people is the interesting part of it. And so that's when I kind of pivoted. It's like, okay, like I like the business side. I don't necessarily like this like whole process of like starting my company. Like it's just like a little bit too tedious for me. So like I'll lean more into like the business of like healthcare delivery and like figuring that out. And so that was kind of that experience through and through.
Okay, so you mentioned kind of going off a normal path and pouring a lot of effort into things that maybe people viewed um weren't as important or normal um and like going on a specific path. So what motivated you to keep doing it? Like why did you keep doing
Um, I think like, it's really easy for people on the outside, like, even friends or like, I mean, my parents were always really supportive of me, like they had a lot of trust in me, but I think I think it also for them was like confusing. Like they never told me not to, but they were always like, okay, we don't like super understand it, but like go for it. Um, and I think, but it's like other mentors you find like along the way, like the people that like push you that are like, like we really think you would be good at this, or we really think you would like this, that like kind of like, that you kind of listen to those voices and like you kind of realize like you're always going to get like conflicting opinions, but it's important to listen to everybody and it's important to like understand the concerns that everybody's like presenting. But like if you have conviction in yourself, like for me, I had a lot of conviction that I wanted to go into medicine. Like that was my drive like through and through. And I knew that like internally. And so I wasn't scared that like these things would distract me in the same way like other people were because like people just don't know what's going on in your head. Um, but yeah, I think like the drive kind of comes from like I want to get better at these things. And then also like time is like a finite resource, right? And so if you think about like this is when we're young, like this is the most time we're going to get to like explore without having all of these like third party responsibilities. Like, we don't have kids, like we don't have like that many bills to pay, like all of that stuff. And so I think like now is the time to do it. And this period of our lives is like actually like much shorter than we give credit for. So we might as well like do the due diligence on like all of the things we might be interested in. Um, Instead of just like try and angle for something you think you are interested in, but you don't really know and you don't know if you're interested in other things. Like, yeah.
You mentioned some things that you went into things thinking about failure rather than assuming, yeah, everything's gonna work out for me. And in truth, not everything worked out, and things happened. You got rejected from UW Med, and some of your classes, like organic chemistry, went badly. How did you deal with like that kind of feeling of rejection almost?
Yeah, I think so something like I always heard when I was growing up is like rejection is redirection. And then, it's super easy to like roll your eyes at it, but then in hindsight, you realize like it's mostly true. Like for me, UW Med, like I really wanted to go to UW. Like um I wanted to like come back to the West Coast. Like I had been on the East Coast after like high school and like college for a while. And I got my UW Med rejection about like 5 minutes before my Penn Med interview for med school. And so for me, like I was literally like wiping away tears, like logging into my Zoom call for Penn Med. And um I like at the time it like felt like really rough, but like looking back, like there is no better place for me to have been than like Penn Med. Like the ability to like explore different things, to like pursue an MBA if I'm interested in that, like that's like I couldn't have done that at like UW, and like I would have probably chosen UW for like the wrong reasons. And then I would say like with classes, like there's like the classic story, like you don't do well in Orgo and then like you drop out of pre-med, like blah blah blah. And for me, like I didn't do as well as I wanted to in Orgo 1. And I was like really overcommitted at the time. Like I was doing like a 10 different things, and like I kind of had to prove to myself like no, like for Orgo 2, like I'm going to use that, I'm going to figure out, like I'm going to think like actually what went wrong with Orgo 1, like I'm not going to make excuses, like really what do I need to like improve on. And so for Orgo 2 I basically forced myself to relearn all of Orgo 1, like get that foundation in and then build on that foundation for Orgo 2. And that meant I had to put in a lot of time for it and like really get serious for it, but like I told myself like like an A is not like what I'm striving for. Like I have to do exceptionally in this class. Like, and that wasn't just for like, my like A pluses don't mean anything on your college GPA, but like internally it meant a lot for me to like prove to myself I could do it. And I did it. And it was like, it was worth it for me to like stumble so I could like get the process of like, analyzing what goes wrong is really important. Like when things go wrong, like really critically thinking about like where could I have improved is like one of the most important skills you can do so you can implement it for next time. Um, but yeah, like I think dealing with it is like you just have to have a lot of faith in yourself that you can do better if it was like your mistake or like things are happening for the right reason, if it's like some sort of extrinsic force. Um, but yeah, I think just like, have faith in yourself, like know that like things are gonna work out. I think just like having that mindset is like really important.
You talked about being intentional in the institutions or things that you joined. What do you mean by that, and how did choosing Penn shape who you became?
I think like when I say institutions, like I use that really broadly, like clubs, friend groups, social circles, like the gym you choose, like obviously the schools you go to. These are all institutions that you participate in. And I think they have like a really big say in like what you're exposed to and what they push you towards. Like you might not know it, but there are like a lot of things that are like constantly um, like pushing you to certain things. Like for example, had I not gone to Penn, there is no way I would have done private equity in my gap year. Having Wharton like so accessible to me, constantly taking Wharton classes, interacting with a bunch of like Wharton students because they were my friends and they were like in the clubs I do, exposed me to this like world of private equity. And there's like no way that if I went to like a Johns Hopkins, for example, I would have done that. Like there's just not that like exposure in like other schools like that. That's not saying like, there other schools wouldn't push me to other things. Like maybe if I went to like a West Coast school, like one of the UCs, like maybe I would have leaned more into like computer science or something like that. Like who knows, right? But you have to be aware like the institutions you're around will like push you and encourage you to do different things. It's about like making the most of that when you're in the institutions, but also like before you join them, like think about if they serve your interest. Like for me, I thought, okay, maybe like business is interesting to me. Maybe I should be in like proximity to Wharton when I go to undergrad. Um, and because I made that decision, like that's kind of like how things like played out for me because I had the resources and I had the people around me and examples around me to kind of do things. But had I thought that like, oh, like I think computer science would be really interesting for me to explore in undergrad, Penn probably would not have been the place for me to do that. So, um, yeah, I think, understanding, even the friends you hang out with, if all of your friends are doing the same thing, the chances that you break out of that are very low. But if you push yourself into like rooms of where like into friends that you like really admire and appreciate and are doing different things and are doing like really fascinating things, chances are you will explore kind of like what they're doing or you'll learn passively like from what they're doing. So yeah, I think being intentional about like the people you surround yourself, the school you go to, like things like that is like really important.
Staying on the topic of being influenced by the people around you, can you unpack this common saying, if I feel like I'm the best at something, I'm probably not in the right room.
Yeah, I think the best example from like my story that I talked about of that was like my decision in ninth grade to move high schools. And not that I felt like the best at anything in my high school, but I understood like the track I was going down. Like I understood like, okay, like people that are like me tend to like go into these clubs and then they become like the heads of these clubs and then they apply to college and they usually go to these colleges. Like I understood like the route that was kind of like laid out for me. Um, and it felt like too figured out for me. It felt like I was just like uncomfortable with that. Um, and I didn't have anybody that like wasn't doing that around me. Like, I mean, obviously, like I went to East like my ninth grade year. Obviously, there are people that were doing things. Like I just had to like lean into it. But I think for me, hitting like a reset button was just the easiest way to do it. Like with that being said, like if I stayed at East Lake and I wanted to do that, I probably could have. Like I probably could have like branched out to new like groups of people, like new like clubs, etc. But I think the easiest way for me to do it was just to completely like go to a different place. Even though like I loved my family, I loved home, I loved like my friends at East Lake. I loved East Lake. Like there was like nothing wrong with East Lake. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that decision of mine, they figure I was running away from something, but really I was just being like attracted towards something. Um, and so I ended up going to like Exeter, and immediately I was like very intimidated by the people around me. They were like good at things I was not good at. Like, it took me a while to adjust like academically. It was like very rigorous. Like there was just like a lot going on for like I think I was 15 or something in 10th grade, maybe I was 16. Um, so yeah, I think like and that only served me because like as soon as I went, I was exposed to like 100 different things. Learned very quickly it's okay to do things. I like became like exposed to the world of like um finance, like the world of like the East Coast just kind of has its own ethos than like the West Coast, and I got to like experience that really young. Um, I like my friend group was like completely international. Like my best friends from high school, like one of them's like, super rich, like from like Hong Kong, others like middle class from Thailand, like one's like, from inner city Atlanta. Like it's just like the most diversity you could think of. And so, yeah, like I would say like even more than being the best in certain rooms, like if you just feel like really comfortable and you just feel like you know what's gonna happen, like maybe there's like more out there for you to explore.
You mentioned a little bit about networking and learning a lot from networking experiences. A lot of students hear that they need to network and they instantly freeze up. So, what would you say to people who kind of are in the same boat?
I think for me, the biggest mindset change was like going from thinking about networking as asking for something, and shifting that mindset to like networking from learning about something or exploring something or just like making a connection with someone. As soon as I shifted it to that, like I didn't have like a clear end result, like that made it so much less intimidating because it is really it was at least counterintuitive for me to like go up to complete strangers and ask for jobs or like ask for like, letters of recommendation. Like all these things were like, it felt weird to me and it felt like very transactional and I did not, it was just not intuitive to me. So I decided to uh just start like talking to people, just like open the conversation, like see what happens and see like what they want to help me with, because a lot of people have something they want to offer like in these conversations. um and sometimes it's just like life lessons and you like listen to them and you like internalize them. And sometimes it's you don't learn like almost anything except like, oh, this person like, grew up in this place and like this person's interest is this. Okay. But then like a year or something, you see the same person again, and then like all of a sudden, like it opens something up. I would also say like if you have something to offer, like if you have like a skill or like something that you think would be like interesting for them, like even if it's just like I can like work for you for free, stuff like that. I think that's like also important to like leverage. Like you do have something to offer if you want to. You just have to think about what it is. And so yeah, I would just think about like the like networking as like less transactional and just more about getting to know people, and seeing like what they want to help with. I think also just rule of thumb, people are just so much more willing to help you than you think they are. They're like much less judgmental than you think they are. Like nobody is spending that much time thinking about you really. So yeah, just like use that to your advantage and just get to know people. Yeah.
If there's one big misconception about working in healthcare, it's that being a healthcare means that you're becoming a doctor or you're going into some specialization like a doctor, like some neurosurgery or cardiology. But you see it very differently. And so what does the bigger picture looks like?
I would say, first of all, like it's really important to remember if you like want to make the most money, if you want to help the most people, if you want to like basically like anything you're thinking about optimizing, like being a doctor is not the way to do that. There's so many smarter ways to make money. There's so many smarter ways to like help a lot of people. Like there's a lot of things out there that can like optimize those things for you really quickly. But if you're kind of like me and like you're kind of like in a Venn diagram of things that you're trying to like get out of your career, then maybe like medicine is like in the center of that Venn diagram and it makes sense for you. But I think there are hundreds of things that like impact a patient's health, like before they even step into that, operating room or that like clinician's room. Um, and those forces, have to do with like the cost of healthcare, like access to healthcare, like the quality of healthcare, the treatments being given, like all of those things. Like if you're interested in like med devices and building the next great like implant, then like pursue that. Like that makes way more sense. Like if you're really interested in like helping people in their like darkest moments and really being with them and like, providing care, maybe like nursing is for you too. Like I mean, there's just so much out there for you to like explore, and so many things that influence a patient's health. Like, it really doesn't make sense to just only think about like medicine. Like, I thought about like every single like, I spent some time thinking about like becoming a nurse, and I still sometimes, I envy the amount of time that like nurses get to spend with patients, and like when I'm in like shadowing in the clinic, like a lot of times I will like spend more time with the nurse than with the doctor just because like they get more patient time. Like there's just a lot of different things to like think about and like assess in yourself, like, what is speaking to me and like what can kind of like get me there.
A lot of high schoolers are really curious about healthcare, but we have no idea what we want or what to do in it. So, what's your advice?
I think my general advice is just like if you think you have an interest, um, figure out some way to like dive into it. Like if you think you're interested in medicine, shadow. Like if you think you're interested in like, um like if you think you're interested in medicine, like get like a job, like get like something like that will like give you that clinical experience and then like commit yourself to it and like really dive into it. Um, I would say like if you think you're interested in like startups or something, you don't even have to join a startup. It's so easy these days to like make one. Like I probably started and failed like two or three like startups with my friends and like, it's so easy to like dive into it and like get that experience and to like talk to people. Um, Especially with like, AI and like learning is so accessible. Like there's just like no excuse anymore to not dive into things head first. And if you're not getting opportunities and you feel like, oh, there's just like no opportunities for me, just like talk to more people. Just like keep talking to people and keep and like, say your interests like without hesitation. Like if you're interested in something, like this is something I really had to work on. Like I used to kind of like be shy about saying like I was interested in medicine. Um, just because I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll get into med school, like blah blah blah. But like I think um there are like, I mean, there are some people that are just like really unabashed about it. And they're the ones that like people know like to help. But if you don't talk about your interests, like you just, you won't get there. So, um, yeah, I would say dive in head first. And if you're not interested in it, then you know, and that's great, and move on. Yeah.
I thank you so much for those responses. Right now, I'm going to be moving on to audience questions. And the first question there is can you share more about your experience in healthcare finance?
Yeah, so I worked in specifically private credit, which is like pretty private equity adjacent. I know it's like we're all in high school, so I won't get in the nitty-gritty, but a lot of it was about like evaluating healthcare companies, um, and assessing if they were like financially um sound, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. And so that was like obviously a lot of financial analysis, but also a lot of like conceptual thoughts about like what are the big risk factors that could come for this like, this nursing home, for example, or this like roll up of I don't know, like specialty pharmacy centers. Like what are the big things that could impact this company and like, and like the credit perspective, like what are things that are going to impact this company that could go wrong in the next 5 years? And how do I kind of like mitigate these risks and think about them? And is this a company worth investing in? Is this a company worth giving a loan to? Um, and that was really cool because I got exposed to like one thing I learned from my healthcare finance job is there's like 100 companies doing like every single thing you could think of, and they're all making like $100 million a year. Like there are so many ways to make money, like you wouldn't even like think about them. Like we like evaluated like people that were making like valves for like vivariums for, like people's like research, like the tanks that they keep mice in for research. Like you wouldn't think like there's a company out there that's making like $150 million for this, but there is. Um, and how do you kind of think about that? And it kind of like really informed the way that I like look around the world, and like the world is kind of just like shaped by these businesses and by these like organizations. And there's a lot of like financial powers like at play. Like even as a doctor, it was like really big for me to understand like private equity's impact on healthcare and like what I'm going to be facing as a physician as they continue to be like more involved in healthcare. Um, and so yeah, I think just like I learned more like bigger picture trends and like concepts through like the experience.
The next chat question is exploring various clubs in high school to figure out what works for an individual versus showing consistency in clubs for 4 years. What works well for college apps?
I think early on it's completely okay to like explore a bunch of different things. Um, but then like, critically choose like, okay, this is like Model UN, for example. Like I mean, I explored like 10 different things like my first year at Exeter, like simultaneously, but I like was like, I really like this and I think I could like really build, myself as like a competitor and like as a teacher here. Like I want to keep investing in it. And then I just showed up. Like I just kept showing up. I kept taking opportunities that they gave me. And then I think a lot of people would be really surprised. The easiest way to make it into like leadership positions, this applies to college, this applies to like even now med school, like the easiest way to make it into leadership positions is just by being consistent. Like if you're just consistent and you like continue to like do what you say you're gonna do, like you continue to like submit your deliverables on time, you continue to show up to meetings 5 minutes early, you continue to like be reliable and like trustworthy, that will get you so far in these clubs. Like you really don't have to like angle yourself as like the best of anything, but you'd be so surprised how many people like don't do the things they say they'll do. And when you say something, like it should really mean it. Like you should really be willing to like put in the work when you say it. So, that's like my like honestly like my honest advice for getting on leadership or any of these clubs. Like I made leadership for so many things that I was really bad at. And it was just by like showing up and like being consistent and like just doing what I said I was gonna do.
What are all the things that you did in high school that helped you stand out in college admissions?
Um, Obviously high school was like a while ago for me, so it's hard to exactly remember, but like there's like the baseline stuff like everybody has to do. Like unfortunately, we all have to take the SAT. Like we all have to. Well, I don't know, is that optional anymore? I'm not sure. But my when I was taking the SAT, like we all had to take the SAT and like we all had to do like blah blah blah. But then I think like showing dedication to certain things and like for me, I was like very clear on like my passions. Like even my college counselor in high school told me like, oh, maybe you shouldn't say you're interested in being pre-med because it's more competitive. Like it's just more competitive to like indicate interest in you know, all of these like pre-med things. And I like had to like really reflect and be like, wait, it makes no sense for me to say I'm not interested in pre-med because like although I was exploring all these other things, I was also doing like pre-med things. Like it wouldn't have made any sense for me to like not indicate it. And so I had to like stay true to myself and I like wrote that and I was like very clear about that. Um, but I think it's much better to be like invested by the end of high school in like three or four things than it is to have done like 15 things and not be able to like talk passionately about any of them. I also think I had some really, really amazing teachers in high school that I kept relationships with, even when I wasn't in their class, that really like came through for me and like letters of recommendation. Like I remember like one of them, he was like my favorite bio teacher. And he like continued to give me these like opportunities, like even outside, like when I was like not in his class, because he knew I was so interested in it. Like he would like call me like every single year after I took his class for like to do the like dissections with the like new students and like walk them through it and like teach them. And so that gave me new opportunities. And he ended up like I mean, he told me he wrote like the most glowing letter of recommendation for me that he had ever written. And like that was obviously not something I asked for. I just asked him because like I loved him as a teacher and I like loved the relationship I had with him. But yeah, I think like cultivating those relationships too was like very powerful for me in college. And I didn't cultivate them with the intent of getting like glowing recommendations or opportunities, but I think just showing your interest can also like get people on your side and like help you, help you in ways you don't expect in the future.
The next chat question is, did you do any volunteer work during high school and how did you find those opportunities that interested you?
I can't specifically remember for ninth grade, because that's probably the most relevant, because I was at Eastlake. I think there were like volunteer, I want to say there was like honor society, something that like was like running volunteering thing. I don't remember too much from that, but when I moved high schools, I got really involved with our like we had a like volunteering organization that would like connect us with like um community organizations in uh like New Hampshire and stuff like that. So I got involved through that. Yeah, but it was mostly like just through my school and like I wasn't because I was in a boarding school, I was limited by like transportation and stuff. I was just mainly doing things through my school.
How do you feel about the role of college counselors and how can we best leverage them?
So I was really lucky. I want to make this applicable for everybody. I was really lucky. In the high school I went to, we had like world class college counselors, and I didn't feel like I had to go out of my way for that. Like they were very smart about like telling me like this is where we think you have the best shot of applying. Like this is kind of like um this is how I would build the story. Like they read my like, essays and stuff and we like workshop the essays. Like it was like very helpful and like that was a huge perk of going to like like that school. Um but I know for maybe like the more helpful things, like for med school, I like obviously had to go through the process again. And I did end up hiring like a counselor, but only for essays and like workshopping essays and stuff, which was like really helpful just to get like third party, it's not your mom, it's not your dad, it's not your parents. Like I think that was really helpful. So like I'm sure they have services like that for high school. But I don't think you need to be spending thousands of dollars on like college counselors. But if writing for you is something that like stresses you out and you like want somebody to like gut check your writing, I think like the third party perspective is like a valuable one. But yeah, like strategizing for med school is like a little different than undergrad. But like, I mean, people talk and like, your friends have like a really good sense of it too. Like I don't think you don't necessarily need to spend like a ton of money on college counseling.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya. I think that brings our Q&A session to a close. And thank you for sharing your journey and your story and your experiences. Some of the few key takeaways that I got from today, one is that your path doesn't have to be a straight line, and that we should all explore our different interests and stay open to new opportunities. I also learned that we shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves too early. We should try new things that help us discover what truly fits us. And we should also enjoy the journey, not just the outcome. And every experience that we have teaches us something different. You also spoke about failure and how it's information and that we should learn, adapt, and just keep trying. I think another big key takeaway is that healthcare is bigger than just becoming a doctor, and there are a lot of ways to explore the way how we can make an impact in that field. So I think that brings our session to a close. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. We hope you leave today feeling encouraged to be curious and to embrace every part of a journey. So your voice matters. If you would like to cover a specific topic next peer up session, make sure to drop future suggestions for topics at peer-up.org. And for upcoming talks, recordings, and YouTube shorts, make sure to visit peer-up.org. And if you enjoyed today, please share Peer Up with a friend and keep our community growing. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Chaitanya, for making this session work.
Thanks, guys. It was fun. And I dropped my number and email in the chat if anybody is interested in reaching out. I'm like always happy to help.